James Gunn may just be the first person to admit that most of the time, the third film in a trilogy is the worst out of the bunch. In a recent interview, the director talked about how hard he worked on the soundtrack for the upcoming film. Not just that, but this time, Rocket's backstory will be a significant part of the film. Let's dive deeper into it. Starting with threequels doesn't always go right. It's one thing to go ahead and make a good sequel, but a threequel is an entirely different monster, and one that mainly has failed. Some of the franchises we know and love have been victims of the same kind of curse that ended up in a third film that's, at best, average, if not a complete flop. For many fans of superhero movies, the third Guardians film is one of the most anticipated movies of 2023. Not only do we get to see our favorite characters one more time, but this might be the last time we see them on the screen. The film also marks the director's last film with the MCU before he completely shifts over to working as the co-CEO of DC Studios. The director instantly became a legend for the MCU after turning the most obscure heroes into some of the most popular ones in the franchise. A lot of its success has been because of his incredible writing and directing style that depends heavily on his love of humor and classic rock needle drops. For many of us, a new soundtrack in the film is as exciting as the film itself, especially given how Gunn has a knack for bringing fun, once forgotten, one-hit wonders to the main stage. Not just that, but he knows really well just how much people love the music in his films, and plans on making his last film with Marvel to include the best songs. Next up, working twice as hard. The director said that he worked twice as hard on the soundtrack for the film than both of the ones for the previous movie combined. The director has never tried to hide just how much the final installment means to him. Along with being an ending to one of the film series that made him one of the best directors in the industry, it's also the film that he has the most personal connection with from the trilogy, something that he expresses with its focus on Bradley Cooper's Rocket Raccoon. One of the biggest reasons he wanted to make the film was that he always felt like Rocket's story needed to be told. He says that to him, the character has secretly been the protagonist of the entire movie series. He also thinks that he enhances the traits of all the other members of the Guardians. They've been through some horrifying things, and that's exactly what brings them together. But in Rocket's case, it's much more extreme. Let's talk about James Gunn's interview with EW. Yet the director told Entertainment Weekly that the last film had one of the most difficult soundtracks. After Quill got his hands on the Zune MP3 player in the sequel, there were several decades of music that they could choose from. Each song in the film franchise is very carefully selected, and because of that, this was a huge problem. After multiple years of selecting music only from the 70s, having so much content to work with made it difficult for the director to choose a song. He said that he had to work twice as hard on this film's soundtrack, much more than the first two movies. Moreover, everything we know about Guardians of the Galaxy 3. While music is undoubtedly an essential part of the franchise, there are still a lot of other details that the director has already shared about how the music will be very different this time. Not just that, but we can expect the film to be the final outing for the current version of some of the most unexpected heroes from the galaxy. It takes place after all of their current appearances in the franchise, and the director promises that it will be a super emotional outing for the characters this time. Still, we'll also be diving deeper into one character specifically. Volume 3 will be centered around Rocket Raccoon, and there have even been some clues that the character may die. After so long with him, it would indeed be tragic to see him go away, especially since he'd be leaving Groot all alone behind him. Of course, since they're all coming back for the third film, many new characters are also showing up, such as Adam Warlock and High Evolutionary. Lastly, what's next for the Guardians? The current team of Guardians may have their story come to an end in the upcoming film, but that surely does not mean that we won't see them come up again. Even if major characters did die, since the MCU is moving towards a multiversal storyline anyway, there's always a chance of them coming on screen again through another variant of the character. Even if other variants of the character don't show up, they're still popping up in blockbusters that are coming up, such as Secret Wars and the Kang Dynasty. Similar to to how they had to come to Earth to fight against the evil Thanos. It's highly likely that they're going to reunite with one another after the world is torn apart by Kang, though some heroes, such as Drax, will be exiting the franchise. Other than them, everyone could show up again. So while the third film may be a hard goodbye to the characters, it's not the last time we're going to see them. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is changing Rocket's origin story and redefining the entire trilogy. Coming up, exploring Rocket's emotional origins. James Gunn, the director of the third Guardians of the Galaxy film, recently revealed that in the upcoming movie, we're finally going to find out more about the emotional origins of Rocket. While the second film came out in 2017, the famous superhero team has also managed to pop up in many other movies in the MCU. One of its most recent appearances is in Thor: Love and Thunder. Along with the upcoming holiday special of the Guardians of the Galaxy, Chris Pratt's Star-Lord, Zoe Saldana's Gamora, Dave Bautista's Drax, Bradley Cooper's Rocket, and Vin Diesel's Groot are going to join forces once again in the third and final installment of the trilogy by James Gunn. While there are still a lot of questions about how the upcoming film is going to put an end to the titular team's story, the director recently talked about it in an interview that he had with comicbook.com, as he talked about how the upcoming film is going to dive deeper into the backstory of the fan favorite Rocket. Though the director was still super careful not to spill out too many details about what the film has in store for audiences, he did tease that Rocket's past is one of the main focuses of the super emotional story they're going to be showing. He talked about how the holiday special differed from the upcoming third installment and claimed that Volume 3 will be a super emotional film. Not just that, but he also said that it tells Rocket's story and how he came about, along with where he's going to go next, and how all of that would tie into the end of this series. Moving on to Rocket Raccoon's Marvel origin story explained. Working on something goofy like that every 4 days, then going back and shooting for the third film, and then going back into it, created a lot of whiplash for him. But according to him, the days on which they worked on the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special were more like snow days, acting as a kind of recess for the team. At the start of the series, we get a brief introduction to how the character came to be as a result of some genetic experiments, but the character has a much richer story as told in the Marvel comics. In the comics, we find out that the experiments the character went through were carried out by a bunch of sentient robots whose main task was to take care of a planet full of mentally ill humans. The robots then made Rocket Raccoon, along with a bunch of other similar creatures, take their place as the caretakers of these humans so they could move on to the other half of the planet. The first film didn't really dive into this, though it did make some passing references to the character's homeworld of Half-World. While the series references to the character's homeworld don't really confirm whether the MCU's version of the character will have the same backstory as his version from the comics, we can be sure that it's going to be similar at the very least. Finally, how Rocket's Marvel origin sets up emotional GOTG3 ending. In the comics, after he's been abandoned by the sentient robots, the character, along with other characters, continues their task of taking care of the troubled humans that reside on the planet. There's even a point at which the character teams up with the Hulk to save his world along with Lila, his girlfriend. It's unclear how much of the character's backstory the upcoming film will look into, but the events of his past in the MCU could tell us more about why he is how he is. Cooper's version of the character gives him a super short temper, and we see him running away from any kind of emotional vulnerability. It's also pretty obvious that the character carries a huge emotional weight around with him everywhere he goes, as we've seen in tiny glimpses throughout his time in the MCU. The third installment in the series has a clear shot at looking deeper into why Rocket tries to push everyone away and maybe give the character some closure from the events he had to deal with in the Half-World. Whether this means that they're going to be bringing a character from his past back or using flashbacks to tell us more about him, Gunn clearly has a huge ending planned out for the character in the upcoming film. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts on the upcoming film? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.